everybody. It is March 5th, 2026. This is the SIG architecture uh, meeting. I'm going to just run down the agenda. So it looks like Ryan was first up with the SLM topic. If you want to share your screen, feel free, or we can just,
Sure.
yeah.
Yeah, I'll do that. Perfect. Okay. Thank you. Um, okay, great. Hi, everybody. I'm Ryan from the Node SIG, the working group Node Lifecycle Management. Too long of a name. I'm here to talk to you all about a KEP I'm working on. Oh, can you hear me? I'm hearing some feedback.
Sounds good to
Oh,
me.
okay. 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 Thank you. I'm here to talk to you about specialized lifecycle management. This is a KEP I'm working on. To give you guys some context about this KEP, I am just going to show this KEP, this declared node maintenance KEP. Some people here probably have already seen. It's been around for a little while. This KEP was focused on doing node maintenance and creating an API for doing node maintenance. And so, like the way I characterize it is like we wanted to build some lifecycle tools. Around the node so that we can life cycle it and have different ways to do that and have some states in tree. Um, and This kept one of the discussions, or actually several discussions we had around this is that the scope was focused on the node. And one of the things we took away from some of these discussions is actually that we need to expand the scope a little bit. And with that, we ultimately want to change the design. And so this led to a new cap. So the like call them the replacement or the one after the declarative node maintenance is this one called specialized lifecycle management. With this new scope, the idea is that when doing lifecycle management, we want to enable this in Kubernetes and we want to change the scope to not just be on nodes, but also on any sort of resource API devices, for example. So expanding the scope to include those different concepts and those APIs. And so really what we're after is like, if I would to contextualize this even more, it'd be we want to increase the observability of lifecycle states or lifecycle concepts in Kubernetes. And so such that like they're observable. And so an example of that would be like if we were draining something, having like a general way to express that so that it's observable, so that there can be many parties that can see that and be like, oh, you're draining, I want to do, I should do this or whatever. And that's valuable because it's life cycle, I mean, touches so many things. It's such a broad concept, and particularly the ecosystem right now is fairly fragmented. And so we wanted to find like a standardized way to express this, so it's observable, so that people can come to the project and be like, okay, I want to build a lifecycle system, and there are already some hooks available, and so I can have a way to use those to communicate with these projects in the community or this components and tree, and have a way to structured way to do that. Um, so that's essentially the context for this. Is there any questions about the context before I move on to like why I'm working on this and why I'm bringing it here?
I have one. You said observable, and then you didn't explicitly mention things that indicate control, but do you mean observable via an API or controllable via an API or both?
So it would be observable via some API, and then it's mostly observable. The control would be something that I would expect like to be built on top of it. It's TBD if like where that would exist. I think there would definitely most of the control would be out of tree. I don't know if there would be one in tree, but I haven't gotten that far like and expressing that in this KEP. So it's observability. I see. Does that answer your question?
It sounds like just TBD. So, okay. Yes.
Yes, CBD. Yes. I saw a hand that flashed by. I don't know
That's
who it
me.
was. Hey.
Hey, this is Tim. I'm super interested in this. We, as a project, have sort of danced around the need for improving life cycle 100 times over the last 10 years. And so I'm interested to see how there might be new takes on it. Like you said, it's got a lot of impact and implication for the system. So I'm very interested in it. I will say one like historical note early on in the project, we tried to describe a sort of state machine of what an object would be going through. And the problem that we found was we kept adding states, and it made a terrible API because it wasn't anything that was generic enough to cover everything was too generic to be meaningful, and anything that was specific enough to be meaningful was different per resource. And so I'm eager to see what you're cooking up here. I just want to say that.
Cool. Okay. I think I'll be able to answer my approach to that when I go to the diagram here. So are there any more questions though before I pivot? Okay. All right. Everyone's eager to see the diagram then. I can tell. Okay. So the way I'm looking to do this is so think of so basically what I've done is I've like taken inspiration from DRA and PVCs and like this concept of being able to advertise capabilities, we'll call it. Like so what that means like DRA, like you can have a driver has this concept that like I'm capable of allocating an H100 and I can allocate it in flavor one, flavor two, flavor three, whatever. And that can be like expressed on an API, like that's like the resource slice, and then we go through a process of claiming that thing and so on. But the important part is like there's this idea of accounting that you can like have this way to for someone you can provide the structure for like someone to come along and express like their intent. And so to like go to what your question was, Tim, like so the requirements is really what you hit on is that like how do you build something that's like is flexible and structured, like useful and that it's structured and then it's extremely flexible so that like I can extend it to be like all the different states and all different little states I might need for life cycle. So the way I've taken that is like I want to be flexible in intent and then structured in the way that like we advertise intent. So that would mean like the DRA model is like instead of having a driver that is advertising what a the different ways we can slice a device, I would have like a driver advertise what states you're capable of transitioning between. And so like this example here that I showed on the picture is like drain, for example, like I could build a driver that says I am capable of doing drain. And the business logic for that can exist in a driver, but we could use the structured API to say, okay, I can do this thing called drain. And it's very clear, like, that that's what its intent is to do drain. And then we can go through the process of actually like, so it's just very expressive. Like drain could be one thing, but you could also do like a bunch of different things like reboot or anything actually along those lines. So it's flexible, but it's also structured and requires us to sort of meet that contract of like, I'm going to be doing this lifecycle event. And then the whole idea is that the observability part, which I think is the first question, is that we would want observability to be generalized such that it's on a node. So I basically just use conditions. So we take the intent, we publish the intent behind an API. We have a contract with sort of a vendor, we'll call it, which would be expressed as a driver, and they would be the ones expressing what they're capable of. And then any sort of transition that we go through gets published on the node. And the idea is that anyone who's tracking this node could read this and do something with that information. And that would be like the larger level system that I was talking about is like if you wanted to do larger level systems of lifecycle management, you would read this thing. Okay, any questions about that? There's a few other things I wanted to go into with this, but any thoughts about that?
I don't think I got it all, but I want to look for your examples to illustrate.
Okay. So I'll say that the requirements, so Tim, like you said, this is exactly what I wanted to tackle, which is like, let me see if I can see if you agree, like, with these, like, we want to have the ability. There's like so many life cycle states. Like I can think of, it's like, how can I name them all? There's maybe for a node we can get close, but there's like an infinite amount. If you think about like devices, and also people just do weird things like that I can never comprehend, and they might want to call their own life cycle state something else. So I want to enable someone to be able to do that, like to choose like and express their life cycle state. That's one thing. But I also want to be able to make it so that they do it in such a way that like they do it in a structured way, like they do it in a way that would be that's discoverable. So like for example, if we had, so I think the classic example of this that people do today is they use labels. They express life cycle on labels, and labels are unstructured. You can pick anything you want on a node and say like that label is draining. But if you were to pick yours is draining, what would mine be? Mine would be totally different, and you can do that n number of times. And so what ends up happening is there's no way for any of us to like communicate because you could have 10 different labels for drain. We have no way to say like that is actually drain. Like there's no way for us to agree. So the idea was that if we can have a way to express the intent in such a way, and we can build some structure into it, then we don't have to do labels. We can just say like, okay, Ryan has a driver that is capable of doing drain, and we can agree that that driver is good at drain. So we're going to use his driver, and we're going to use his state, which is that however he defines drain to be. So something along those lines is that we wanted the ecosystem to be reusable, so structured and then but also flexible. I don't know. Okay, I don't know if that makes sense.
Are you thinking of and sorry, stop me if you have more that like will illustrate this, but are you thinking of this in a like API schema centric sense? Like the node object publishes these states and maybe an adjacency matrix that shows you which states are convertible. And you then have to have a driver which says, I know how to trigger or how to handle these particular transitions. Or are you thinking of it in a like site local space where I could say, in my company, we define drain to mean this, and we have this other state called foobar, and you may or may not have a foobar in your company, but we do. And so here's how you handle the transition from draining to foobar.
Yeah, the second one, where like I would want to be flexible to support in that sense. Yeah, like I would want to be able to say, you could do drain and you could drain to anything you want.
What does it mean if like drain has multiple meanings? Like drain is a simple example, but it already has multiple meanings. Some folks mean take all the workloads off of it, and some folks mean prepare it for destruction. And like how do you reconcile that there are different meanings of a thing? Or ready is another great example of a state that means nothing because it means everything.
Yeah, exactly. How do we reconcile it? I think so. The idea um, is that for the cases where we can agree is that maybe that we use a verb, and the drivers would have to define the meaning. I think like so the meaning would be inherent to the driver. So a driver would be like, so I guess the way you can think about it is like one driver would implement drain such that it removes all of the pods from the node and reaches a drained state, and that's its capability. And another driver doesn't do that. Like basically think of it as like kubectl drain without the daemon sets flag, or keep the daemon sets flag. You could exactly like that. Those are both, you can reach a drain state in both cases. But the whole idea is that if you're the person who's choosing to use that driver, we would express that ahead of time, right? That this driver, this is what its end state is. This is what drained means. And so you could build controllers around when you reach that drain state.
So do different drivers have different understanding of drained? Like, how can I write a driver, or sorry, driver? How can I write a controller that does something when a node is drained if I don't know what drained means?
You'd have to know what the driver's intent is. You'd have to know that this driver, what the driver's definition of drain, or drained is.
Okay,
You'd have to
so
know ahead of time.
my controller would sort of be coupled to your driver that shares the definition.
Yes.
Feel free to jump in, other folks.
Well, so I guess when I think about that, then that sounds like the API that is trying to abstract what the meaning of drain is not able to abstract it sufficiently so that people who are trying to use it don't need to know it. So then I guess I'm not sure. Like, it sounds like you need to have very discrete namespaces because maybe your drain is different than my drain.
Yeah, the fact that some lifecycle event is happening is interesting and useful. Like having visibility to the fact that something is happening and like here's the actor doing it and like here's the, it's in progress, it succeeded, it failed, like what's the last update state, like that's useful. But if like attaching a well-known name like drain to a thing and then like I don't know, like my drain is happening over here and some other drain is happening over there and they're doing totally different things, like it's hard to understand the benefit of attaching a well-known name to it if what that actually means is kind of up for grabs.
Yeah, it would be inherent to the driver, I guess. That would be the answer. It's like whatever the definition of drained is. So this well-known name is yeah, the driver really owns that. So I mean, I kind of have it here. Could you? So I guess the thesis is like, could we derive the meaning from like how would we do it? And so like how would we do it today? Like if it was if we just had a condition or a label that said something was drained, you'd have to go to the node and you'd have to look at the pods and say, okay, well, there's less pods there. Does that mean it's drained? I have no idea. Like it might be, it might not be. But the idea is that the driver is saying that I completed the work that I said I was going to do. And so inherently, like the definition of drain, you have to trust the driver. Like the driver is saying, I did draining to drained. We're in this drained state. You have really no way to verify it anyway, and because it's so ambiguous. But I'm the driver, and I said it's done, and that's what it means. It's what I say it is as a driver.
Just a time check. We've got a couple more things on the agenda. We have a few more hands, maybe get through the current crop of hands and then we'll move on. I tried to summarize in the notes. It sounded like there were three sort of aspects. One was a coordination point for observability. One was a coordination point for control, maybe. And then the third was like definition of well-known states or life cycle phases. So maybe those are aspects to dig into and tease apart. But let's get through the current hands and then we'll move on to the other agenda items.
Tim, are you done?
No, I had one more comment. I'll try to keep it short. It sounds to me like we're talking more about events than we are about states, where a state, like one of the problems with defining things as a state machine is a state is sort of all encompassing. And what we found over and over again is that actually the things people are interested in aren't well coupled to states that way. And this is why conditions came about, is because people are interested in things that are drained and have the network ready, or are drained and don't have the network ready. And so network readiness is not actually part of a particular state. It's really orthogonal in the truest sense to that. And so we tried to, not always successfully, decompose states into orthogonal conditions. I know we have conditions that are not actually truly orthogonal. That's unfortunate. Maybe we should go back and rethink it. But I wonder if what we're talking about here is really well understood or more rigidly specified conditions.
And there's another hand.
Yeah, it's for me. I think I want to make a comment about uh, controllability of that, and if drivers will define how to react on those events and transitions, we may have a problem of like not knowing how much you want to trust which event. And like today, when you're talking about labels, you clearly know that labels are owned by node and like nothing, and taints cannot be set by node. So like you have some understanding of security model with this drain. Like if you will allow drain events to be created by kubelet or drain events created by for other nodes, then it will be a very different security model, but it still may be desirable for one set of drivers, and the other set of drivers will not want drain events to be created by like 4 other nodes. So security model will need to be really carefully reviewed, and I don't know whether we will be able to make it flexible enough to satisfy all scenarios if we don't have a clear definition of what each controller can do with this information.
Yeah, this is one real quickly. Like this is one where I pulled from DRA, where like the lifecycle driver would be the one who is advertising their capabilities. So it'd be like a vendor, essentially, not the user. That would not be namespaced. And then same with like the event is like would probably be controlled by an admin. So like only people who want certain transitions, they would only allow certain drivers and certain transitions in their clusters. Um, and someone with privileges would be the only one that would be by doing these things. Um, but the idea is that once you push this stuff to the node, you have to have this inherent trust with your admin that the states being published, like that when you see them, that you react to them. I mean that's just sort of like a contract you'd have to have with an admin, but it would have to be some sort of understanding there. But we can, yeah, I think it makes sense though, Sergey. We should explore it. Okay,
Uh,
there's another hand.
yeah, that
Yeah.
was mine. I don't know, Zoom switched it off for some reason. So, there is a really good diagram on the server's KSSD repository that you had. Can you just walk us through it? Because I think that'll give a better sense of.
Yeah, so this is okay, so this is called the I did a POC and of this architecture and created something called kubelet or kubectl server-side drain. Um, this was there was a bug for this for many years, so I just took a shot at doing it using this architecture. So pretty much like the idea is that instead of doing kubectl drain on the client side, theoretically, because we have a controller that can respond to a drained um, transition, we can put the idea of kubectl drain into a controller. And so I can basically call the libraries of kubectl drain from inside a controller and run a drain on the server side. And so very simply, like all I've done is I've created 2 transitions, drain and maintenance completes. And all that means is kind of the way it runs is like if you do the transition. We cordon the node, we evict the pods, um, and and then we wait till they drain. And then once they've drained, we say, "Hey, we're done." Like we marked the node as drained as a condition. And then someone will come along later and say, "Okay, maybe I do maintenance." And then after I'm done, I say, "Okay, I'm going to run this maintenance complete transition to say, okay, I've finished my work." It would uncord in the node, and then we just verify that everything is done. Okay. Yeah, does that make sense? Do you have any more questions about that?
We could fill the whole day talking about this, I'm sure.
Yeah.
I'm refraining from making more comments because I know we have other people on, but
Okay. Yeah,
very
that
interesting.
makes sense. Okay, that makes sense. Thank you for your time. I'll be at KubeCon in whatever 2, 3 weeks from now. I'll be at the Maintainer Summit too. I was kind of hoping to do an unconference on this because I like there continues to be a lot of comments about this. So I'm interested to hear your feedback and interested in working on this. So we can talk there. Thank you very much.
Yeah, appreciate it. All right, Mrinal, I think you're up.
Okay, I'll share and see if that works. Do you see my screen?
Yes.
Okay, awesome. So I'm here to talk about FIPS support in Cube. So like the motivation is government, defense, financial services, and many industries require FIPS support. So what we have had in the past is Golang upstream had a branch called as Boring Crypto, which linked to Boring SSL. Red Hat has its own fork, which links to OpenSSL. I think at some point Microsoft also created their own fork. But now, what's happened since Go 124 is upstream Golang is adding native Golang FIP support, and it's under validation right now. So the support has emerged and is maturing over 124, 125. So finally, we have an opportunity to do this in upstream Cube, and not everyone has to go and hack their way around it downstream. So 124 added initial support, 125 did some performance improvements and so on. And with 126, there's a utility added so you can mark certain functions as safe. For example, if you're using MD5 or UUID in a non-FIPS impacting manner, you can add this wrapper around it so that it's considered okay when FIPS mode is enabled. So I did some quick experiments earlier this week. So I was using Go 1257 and didn't 126 today. So I missed that. But it looks pretty promising. So the idea is that at build time, we set this variable go fips 140, set the module v100, and then do a go build. With that, all the binaries get FIP support. So you don't have to do anything else. When you run them, they run with FIPS support on. What this means is all the TLS connections will be using FIPS only algorithms. Now there is another mode which is called FIPS 140 equal to only, which is a stricter mode where it goes and looks at all the algorithm, not just the TLS one. And in that mode, if at runtime it detects that an invalid algorithm is used, it may error or panic. So there's a way to control that. So we can build everything with FIPS by default, and then there is a flag go debug FIPS 140 on, only, or off. So if someone doesn't care about FIPS, they can set it to off, which could be the default. And if one wants to run with just TLS support, you set it to on, and in a stricter environment, you go for only. So some tests, I built everything. The binary size increase was negligible. Ran some initial unit tests. They looked fine. And then also did some analysis with HCD that built fine too. Some smoke tests ran fine. So I'm here to see if there is general interest in adding this support in Cube Upstream. So what it would mean is, I think we can build with FIPS by default, but we'll need couple more jobs to run in that mode. So we can check that it runs fine with FIPS on, and then next step will be moving to FIPS only. So when we move to FIPS only, to enable that, we'll have to go and add the markers around the safe calls, right? So FIPS on is relatively lower hanging fruit, but FIPS only will mean going and adding the exceptions everywhere, both in cube code as well as in dependencies on other modules that we put in. All right, I'll pause.
There's a lot of hands, and I'm not sure who had it up first.
Ben goes first.
Go.
I did. So I did some work on this last release actually. I compiled everything in this mode and found that we were still using MD5 in a bunch of places.
Mhm.
That's removed and blocked now. But I think doing it in upstream by default is a little different. We have to reason about why we're not doing any other national cryptography standards by default, and not just because that's like what Go has available or something like that. I think building it so that it's available might be reasonable. I don't think we should be turning it on by default,
I
though.
agree. Yeah, so that is possible, right? So the hit is very, very low in terms of binary size increase, and we can always specify that the default is go debug FIPS 140 equal to off. And then if you want to go and turn it on, you can use the other flags.
There's some other bits that weren't touched on here, like you have to select the version and people will have different priorities around that because, I mean, for example, there is no actual certified version yet, but at some
Yes.
point there will be tension between the version that's currently most recently certified versus the most up-to-date version
Yes.
of the code. I'm concerned about us winding up with a lot of different builds and also with the wrong perception that we're saying that this is certified, because actually having a certified environment is more complicated than toggling this bit in the build. You need to like vet everything about the stack. So like, for example, Cubatom may not actually result in a like certified environment even if we had this build. So we probably should at least include some disclaimers around that.
I agree. So I think we need to figure out how the life cycling of this module will work, and agree about the environment as well. But I think if we get to a state where we can make sure that whenever we are adding new code, we are either adding that opt out, and if we can build, then it becomes easier, even if we push the harder work of
I
complete
think that
check
kind of
downstream.
makes sense, but then you still have the problem that like what happens if someone says I want, like, I don't know, China's national cryptography standard to work with every code in the main repo. Like there are a number of these other federal standards out there. Are we going to restrict ourselves to the common subset from all of them? I worry about making a reasonable policy for this.
I agree. That's going to be a challenge, and I don't have a good answer for that. But if there is sufficient interest from contributors, we could make a case for 540. Like when I started the call, I gave examples of so many companies maintaining forks of Golangs and like binding to native libraries. So if we have other such situations, we can consider uh, supporting that as well. But yeah, no great. That's not a great answer. I get it.
Dims, I think, was up next.
Yeah. So SIGO, does it need to be on, off? Does it matter?
It shouldn't matter.
Okay.
This is all pure go. So
No, I
Yeah.
mean,
yeah,
like,
yeah.
does the FIPS only require SIGO to be disabled, for example? That's a question, because if you have SIGO, then you are essentially, you can do whatever you want, right? So
Should work for both the modes, but I can double check.
It does not. It's the opposite. You need SIGO for the like Go boring toolchain
Yeah.
when people are using that. Versus if everyone transitions to this, then that's another reason we could consider turning SIGO off by default.
because this one is only
Is Go, is
Golang
pure
It's
Go.
all Go.
Yeah.
That's why I was asking. So if
It's not required, but it means that if the ecosystem moves towards this, that's one more reason it wouldn't be it would be less disruptive to stop building with SIGO by default.
Yeah. Okay. So then the other question that I had is not question, like the way to do it is, we should definitely support building with whatever is necessary, toggles that are necessary, just like we have toggles for so many different things. We should have CI jobs that checks for some of these things, and we could have some verifiers that will check for some of these things and yell at people either in pre-submit or in a periodic job or a post-submit job kind of thing. So we could do all this, but I don't want to like us to say yes, we are going to do this sort of thing, right? People, we should do as much possible without actually building the binaries and making the release. That is what I would support at this point in time, without knowing too much
Yeah, so I
more
think the
than what you're
minimum, yeah, the minimum then would be, oh, the project is open to accepting patches for what's
correct.
in 126 for
Right.
FIPS 140 dot without enforcement.
As
And then
long
you
as
can, yeah.
it doesn't stop us from doing what we usually do. Like if you say, if you mark the function as FIPS safe or whatever, right? Like if that doesn't interfere with our regular mode of operations and all this other CI jobs that we have, then it is fine. If it's not, then like that's an we should not consider that, because it's going to be interfering with our regular cadence of things across the globe, right? For all the contributors across the globe.
I think I'm up. My feedback is similar. I'm happy to get visibility to things that would block the runtime enablement. I really like the fact that you can take just a normal default build like we're spitting out today and set an environment variable, and the Go runtime like transparently switches to this mode. That seems great. So if there's like a CI job, like our type check job, that would flag things that we're doing that would cause problems with flipping into that runtime mode, I would like to know that so that if it's easy for us to drop, like the old MD5 cruft, we can just drop it. If it's easy for us to flag as like non-FIPS impacting, like Go has built in a way to flag that. That seems fine. So visibility to that, and if there's low effort ways to like let people who care about this opt in at runtime, that seems fine to me. I wouldn't go as far as like separate builds or changing the build defaults. That doesn't seem helpful.
Okay. So maybe like that we are open to adding like a separate CI for this, but we don't change the default builds, which is reasonable as long as we can,
we have like CI jobs that pulls dependencies from like latest dependencies. We have CI jobs that run against latest Golang master. So this is just one more variant. It's just that we need people who are willing to watch those jobs and fix them when they fail, right? Like rather than adding burden to the people who are already monitoring these things.
That makes sense. I'm hoping there is enough interest across companies that once we set
Exactly.
this up,
So we need to round them all up and say, hey, you got to watch these things.
Right.
All right, Mo, and then we're gonna move on.
Yeah, I'll keep it quick. Let's see. I think you, Jordan, and Dims, you covered mostly what was my thoughts. Like, I think, yeah, I can't imagine any future where the default is FIPS. As certainly never FIPS strict, because I just like I don't think most people even agree with what that means. Like 25519 is totally excellent, and there's no reason not to actually use it. I don't care that it's not FIPS compliant. Yeah, so I just don't think we should get into business. I have no problem enabling people to do whatever crazy thing they want to do, but we should just ship vanilla things and enable whatever else people want.
Yeah.
That does leave an open question about if we would compile it in the default build or not, even if it's turned off by default. Like those are two. So there's a toggle for like build with the Go FIPS stuff. And then there's a different dimension that's how strict are you about actually switching to use it at runtime?
Yeah, this is the build thing, and this is the runtime. The FIPS
Ben,
one.
way I would think about it is like have a separate CI/CD job that is periodic that will switch this on and do the build. And if something fails, it's up to this new set of contributors to help fix it. it should not be on the people who are submitting the PRs to go fix the FIPS
I
variation
agree with that,
option.
but
Yeah.
there's a question about would you toggle like this build option so that it's available as a runtime option?
I would say no. Like if you want FIPS, you can build your own images. Like it's fine.
I really thought Go made it so the default build could be toggled on at runtime with environment variables.
Yeah, but we need to set this if we go down that
You have,
route, and then it can be toggled at runtime.
and that means we're also taking a stance on which version of the FIPS module.
Exactly. We need to figure out the life cycle of how that is going to evolve.
So I actually kind of.
But we also have CI jobs that build with special flags, so not a problem.
It wouldn't be a problem to have a separate job, but I think there is a specific ask about the default builds and what
Yeah,
I wouldn't change our
default
build.
no. By default, I would say no.
That's my agreement. I didn't think we actually discussed that part.
Yeah. All right, I'm going to time box it here because I want to make sure we get to Dan's item, which is last.
All right, so I'll open an issue and then we can take it from there. Try to summarize what it is. Thanks, folks.
Yep. All right, Dan, you're up.
Okay. I don't know how much time this will end up taking because, but let me. So, so we've just finished or just gone to beta on strict IP CIDR validation, fixing these validation problems in IP addresses in CIDR in all the core fields, and discovered that our cell validation gets it wrong. And it's actually documented as having the right behavior, but the code does the wrong thing with it. And so we were trying to figure out, well, can we say it's a bug since it was documented one way, but this could potentially be an API break that would break some people. So then we're like, well, we did warnings for the core validation. Why don't we do warnings for the cell validation? But we have no way of doing warnings for cell. So then I was like, well, okay, how about if we just deprecate the function, replace it with a new one? We have no way of doing deprecations with cell. So it wasn't really clear what the best way forward on this is. And I just wanted to bring it up because the longer we do nothing, the more people who could end up depending on this, and then it will just be more of a pain for us when we try to fix it in the future.
Yeah. I was digging into this a little bit. First of all, our cell libraries we can version. So we have a way to do a controlled rollout of a behavior change in a cell function. So like we have our CIDR library, we can say, okay, version 2 of the CIDR library where we fix this behavior, that is in effect starting in 136. And so if you roll out 136 binaries and you're like, I want to run an emulation mode for like 135 or 134, like you would still get the old behavior until you said, okay, pick up 136 behavior. So that's one aspect.
Okay, so in a related thing, we discovered there was some bug in the cell parser that was causing the costs to be crazy. And we're like, oh, it's fixed in 1.34 or something. I forget exactly what. But we realized we still couldn't depend on it because people might have older versions of the CRD with different versions. Like, because this is all about CRDs, it's sort of separate from Kubernetes versioning anyway and makes it hard to coordinate.
When you're saying cell here, is it validating emission policy or the cell rules for CRDs or both?
Jordan just said it's both. I encountered it in validating CRDs, but
I think the library is usable from both places. When it's in a CRD, when it's in a CRD validation rule, ratcheting validation should make updates of existing objects safe. So if they already have existing data persisted and they upgrade to 136 where we fix this, existing objects like that aren't modifying the field should be okay. Like ratcheting validation doesn't tighten enforcement. So for CRDs, that's fine. For admission, it would get stricter.
But again, that
So,
would, well, I guess if the admission controller
yeah,
was looking at existing fields, it could potentially
and it certainly
shoot
will be.
itself.
So,
Yeah.
so I'm thinking, Jordan, I'm sure you're going down the same track. Versioning is necessary. I'm not sure whether it's sufficient because you can imagine someone who says, I have old data, I have a
Yeah.
validating admission policy. I want to prevent that old data from getting worse, but I can't use the new if it doesn't pass, unless we give them a function that lets them have old behavior. I'm not sure they have a safe path to make a change.
So there would be a function, a separate function that would give them the old behavior because there are some cases where you want that. Um, it's just not the normal default case and shouldn't have the name is cider.
Oh, so this isn't a like it's strictly wrong. It's like it's right sometimes.
It's right rarely. We did not find any current users of it that actually want the semantics that it has. They all want the semantics it's documented as having, as opposed to the semantics it actually has.
I've
I think
heard
it's
of right
clear.
once and right never. I've never heard of right rarely. That's funny.
Clearly, we just make a is valid cider too. Um,
But we talked about that. But the problem is there's currently no way to deprecate the existing function, right?
well, it sounds like you need to keep it forever, right? Like if it's rarely right, then it's right often enough that it needs to exist. And given the existence of data that may never actually be updated to be more valid.
If you want to keep the current behavior addressable for some rare case, could we fix this with documentation and say like the documentation for this function is this is the rare case, and you probably mean like cider, like whatever the I don't know. Can we fix it with a second function and like document this one to high heaven?
We can.
I don't know
it would make the naming of cell validation functions inconsistent with the naming of core validation functions, so that if you assumed that they matched, you would shoot yourself in the foot by using the wrong one.
Okay. We're probably not going to solve it in this meeting, but the tools we have, we can version our cell libraries so that at least people who are like upgrading binaries but emulating older binaries would wait until they got to the current version to like pick up the new behavior. So that's one tool. For some contexts like CRD validation rules, ratcheting makes it safe for existing data. When it's used in admission, if they're admission could actually use like the value old value mechanic if the person writing the cell knew that the behavior of this had changed. So like if someone had a rule and they wanted to allow, you know, old data that didn't match, like there are ways admission can do that, but what we're really concerned about is people who wrote cell and don't know that this is changing, like shooting themselves in the foot.
So would either adding the ability to add API warnings attached to CRDs via cell, or adding the ability to deprecate cell functions and get warnings at CRD creation time or something if you're using a deprecated cell function, would either of those things be seen as useful? This feels like no.
I don't see we would never remove the cell function. So like warning about it forever, I don't know.
We do that for fields in core, right?
Yeah. Maybe let's start a thread in the API review Slack and kind of dig into like what would it look like to keep this function as is and document the narrow use and add a second one that like behaves the way you probably want. That's one option. The second one is fix this in place and have like a second function that's like the narrow, you probably didn't mean this. That's the second option. And the third option, I guess those are the only two options I see.
Yeah, do nothing.
Well, sure, I guess.
Okay, I can start a thread. I guess I can try to fill in more the pros and cons in the issue as well.
I don't know if it's the kind of thing we could reasonably like scan for use on the internet and like see, is anybody using this? If so, where and how? Like, is it widespread? Is it narrow? Could we do outreach? Like, what would the impact be if we fixed it in place? Like,
we did a GitHub code search, and there were
Okay.
3 users, and they all wanted the way it's documented, not the way it is. So
yeah,
but
I mean, that's a useful data point, actually. Thinking about what would happen with their existing data if they were using it in CRDs and using it in validating emission, and like, what would the worst case be if someone became aware of it? How could they remediate it in a safe way? Like, if we fix it and they upgrade and they get bitten and they're like, oh, I have existing data, it's like, oh, well, just adjust your validating emission to do this, and you can do ratcheting toleration like until you fix up your data. Like, if there's a reasonable path to it, maybe that's okay, but those are the kinds of questions we would need to answer to figure out which path to go down.
Okay.
All right, we are at time, and yeah, we're at time. Thank you all. This was great. Appreciate it.
Thanks for running this, Jordan.
All right. Yeah.